Welcome to the Cosmic's Inner Space Podcast. I'm Cami K, Inner Space Surfer and Cosmic Creatrix at CamiK.com. Are you ready to launch a business, expand your cosmic consciousness, amp your intuition, or simply celebrate the everyday messiness of being human? Then the Cosmic's Inner Space Podcast is for you. I'm stoked to introduce you today to my friend and the amazing designer behind my CamiK.com brand and website, Meredith McCreight. Meredith is a brand consultant, designer and developer, and a certified coach. She owns Create Without Bounds, a small creative consultancy that helps women scale their heart-centered businesses, like mine, through soul-focused branding, strategic design, authentic marketing, and educational resources. After receiving her coaching certification from JRNI in March 2018, Meredith realized she needed to integrate coaching into her design practice in service of women business owners. 5 months later, after nearly a decade and a half in marketing and design jobs, she said buh-bye to the corporate world forever and founded Create Without Bounds. Meredith believes everyone has a unique dharma or purpose in this lifetime. And it's not only our divine right to live in alignment with our dharma, it's our responsibility to share our gifts with this world in service of the greatest good. Branding and marketing are merely tools that allow us to spread the word about our gifts so that we may better serve and impact. When she's not vibing high with her soul-centric community, Meredith enjoys meditation, journaling, hiking, riding her bike, and going for long walks with her dog, Miles. She's also running the streets of her hometown of Charlottesville, Virginia, with anti-racist awareness run crew, Prolyfyck. The name was inspired by the lyrics of Nipsey Hussle's song, Victory Lap. She loves cooking complex, wholesome meals while jamming out to music and cherishes her time with her loved ones above all else. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to share this delicious conversation with my friend, Meredith McCreight. Hey. Hi. I just, for the listeners, Meredith and I were just having a really fun chat, and it started going down really fun rabbit holes, and I was like, I haven't hit the record button yet. So welcome, listeners, to our conversation that we already started. Meredith was just sharing that she went for a run this morning, and so...
Yes, I'm part of a run group, and they go running every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning. But I have only been going Wednesdays and Fridays because Monday is just not a good day for me energetically in the physical exercise realm. So.
Or a lot of things, right? So we were just talking. That's why I was like, we got to hit record. We were just talking about how out of control time is. I mean, what is time? But as far as being productive, and who said 8 to 5 is when humans are the most productive, and just what BS that whole concept is of not only what hours of the day are we productive, but also maybe the first 3 weeks of the month you're super productive, but you need week 4 off. And then of course for us ladies, we were talking about, we're on cycles and have our natural highs and lows. And I know I am, as a later 40-something lady, I'm definitely experiencing hormonal shifts that are happening. So thank you for being here after running and getting up at 5 a.m. and driving. And we have a 3-hour time difference. So I'm just getting ramped up, and Meredith is probably hitting that mid to late afternoon peak.
It's all good. This is the highlight of my week.
Yay!
So, yeah, excited to be here.
Well, this is a big week for me and Meredith. So I'm not sure when we'll be releasing this podcast. So we'll be speaking about the past when people listen to this. But today we launched my baby Inner Space Camp, and Meredith is I don't even know all the things. I want to say designer, but hand holder, shoulder cry honor, ear listener. So I said, we've come so far this week together because Monday I was having a meltdown with all the technology, and I was just like, I can't do it. And you were like, girl, you got this. Let's just knock this out. Take it down a beat. She talked me down from the ledge.
You talked yourself down.
I did, because by Tuesday it was a whole different shift, which is just always good to remember, you know. I mean, as I'm even stepping into the camp experience, which will be June and July, I mean, that's what it's all about. You know, the people that I'm calling in to join that program, we're going to get into next evolution of self, next evolution of a creative project, next evolution of a business or a career. And we hit those walls, right? Like we get
right. And when you're doing those live sessions, you know, you're asking people to show up however they are too.
Yes.
So setting a good example that not every day is perfect, and you just show up as you, and that's what you've got.
Yes, that's so. I just typed a note in at the end of the welcome kind of page about, you know, please be present, finding a quiet spot, setting a sacred space. But I will address that on the first call of like, hey, also, we're all in our own little worlds and realities. And when we come onto these calls, and I've been on those calls, right, where it's like in the last minute, everybody's like sitting down and getting their water and getting comfy and all the things. And, but being understanding that, like, yeah, somebody might have screaming kids in the other room. And I know I have barking dogs all the time at dinner time. So 5:30 p.m. is going to be real interesting, because that's the neighborhood dog bark time. Anyway, so I already did an intro, so that part's all done. But so I guess I'll just share with everyone. So Meredith and I met in Phoenix. I don't even know what year it was. 2008, 9, 10. When were you there?
I moved there in 2005. So I had to have met you around 2007 or 2008.
I moved there in 2008. So we must have met right after I got there.
So I think it was then, because we met in that business networking breakfast group or whatever.
Right? Isn't that funny? We used to do those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like you were friends with someone. It was like a PR group or a group of PR peeps. And there was,
I worked for a nonprofit. And we had an agency that did some work for some of our events and that we partnered with. Actually, no, I think that they were the PR agency for one of our partners, which I don't know if I can say this now, but it was Wildflower Baking Company or Wildflower Bakery.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you remember that. And then Carrie.
That's who I thought that was the connection. Yeah. I don't talk to her anymore, but I do see her occasionally like pop up on Facebook or whatever. And I'm always like, oh, hope she's doing well. She was a cool chick. There were so many cool people that I met at that time in Phoenix. And I love that we were there kind of before downtown Phoenix became the beast that it is now. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the people who are there now love it as for what it is now, but I loved it when it was a little less extra. And we were like, you know, I don't know how involved you were in that piece, because I lived over in that part of town. So I was very active and involved in we would do potluck dinners, like community potluck dinners, and be like, there's an art show. And it was at these little, you know, houses that had been converted into art galleries. And I think most of those are gone now. It's just like all those high rises. And
yeah, I know exactly the neighborhood and the houses that you're talking about, because there was like a breakfast place there too, right? That was only open on weekends.
Right. Roosevelt Row area. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember going on some of the art walks.
It's a whole different place now. Like it's all like shiny, glossy. You know what another city that's happened to is San Francisco. Have you been to San Francisco in the last 5 to 7 years? Holy cow. Yeah. Well, change.
Yeah, it happens.
It does happen. So anyway, we met in Phoenix, and then I don't even know when you left. What year? You left kind of a couple years later, right?
I left the very end of 2011.
Okay. I can hear my dogs barking. I'm not sure if you're picking that up. And where did you go? So okay, we met and we stayed in touch loosely, and then we've come back together in the last, I don't know, 2 years, maybe. I think in 2019 is when we started working together on the website. And so I had reached out to Meredith, and was like, I got to get this thing into the world. I got to get a new website. I need a new brand identity, visuals, all the things. Let's work together. It took a whole year to launch the website, and then a whole nother year to launch my first course. But we'll get into that stuff later. So maybe just fill us in, like take us back in the Wayback Machine a bit and tell us a little bit about like where'd you grow up, and you've bounced around and moved a couple of different places. And so you're a seasoned traveler, mover. Tell us who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, that sounds more elegant than it actually was, but yeah, I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia. Both my parents are from South Carolina, so they moved to Virginia when my sister and I were really young. So yeah, most of my adult life, most of my childhood was in Charlottesville, Virginia. And then I went to college right down the road in Southern Virginia. And after I graduated, I lived in Richmond, Virginia for maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And then I moved to Phoenix. And it was sort of I never had really left the East Coast. Maybe a trip here or there for something, vacation or whatever, but really not much exposure to places off of the East Coast. And so I had a friend move to Phoenix and I went to visit her, and I visited in April. So it was like the perfect
weather. Yes.
So perfect. We went to the lake and yeah. And I was very much like, I was mid-20s and down to party. So
pause a second. What did you study in school? What school did you go to, and what did you study in school, and was it related to what you do now?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. So I went to Longwood College, which is now Longwood University. It actually changed while I was there. And I started as an art major. So I was a drawing and printmaking major. And my parents actually paid for college for me and my sister. And so since they were footing the bill, I just remember at some point during my freshman year, they were like, wait, you're an art major? Like, that's not,
you can't get a job.
Yeah. Which, gosh, talk about like, self-limiting beliefs that are drilled into us. But, yeah, so I had to change my major, and the school that I was going to was primarily a education school and a business school. So most people were education or business majors, and I did not want to do either of those things. And I had toyed around with communications when I had first started, because I really like writing and thought journalism might be a career I was interested in. But the communication school actually didn't open on time. So it wasn't open yet. So that wasn't an optional major for me. And so I had been taking all these electives in psychology, and that proved to be an acceptable major to my parents. So yeah, so I changed my major to psychology, and that's what I have a degree in. And I honestly wouldn't change it, because even though I've come back to artistic roots and I do creative things, I think that psychology piece was just so critical in opening my mind, not only to the way that people think about everything that goes into business, from their own decision-making to what appeals to somebody visually and all that stuff. There's so much psychology there, but I learned so much about myself too. So I just think it was just such a really lovely accident that I ended up in psychology and made my way back to art. But
so that's so interesting, because parallel lives once again. So I studied communications, which we called it communications. It was more on the broadcast journalism side, and specifically on the radio side. We did a little TV, but mostly radio. And then I started taking psych classes as electives, because I too was like very fascinated in the way, and it tied so much into what we were talking about with media and propaganda and media ethics and all the things. And I just kept taking elective. And my advisor was like, if you stayed one extra semester and finished these final 3 classes, you can declare this as a second major. And I was like, sign me up. So who was your favorite back then of the kind of iconic theorists? Did you have a fave?
Probably Carl Jung, just
Me too.
because it felt a little more applicable than the Freudian stuff. But I really found it all really interesting. I mean, I just don't really believe that any of that is wacko or crazy. So because I'm sure at the time when that stuff came out, it was
Right.
it probably made a lot more sense then. It was the first time someone was kind of challenging, status quo thinking about the brain and the way we work. And if there is, something else driving these machines of our bodies and
right. And trauma and all that stuff. I loved Jung, and I loved Erickson also on the developmental kind of humanistic side. And of course, Jung, like all the synchronicity and, the question marks and the connectivity of everything and how it's all interrelated and all connected. And in the quirkiness a bit, like the people in my classes were quirky, the instructors were quirky. It was like this whole other world. And I was like, oh, these are my weirdos. But like on the front, I wasn't letting my weirdo out as much yet at that point. It was like the beginning of like, oh, I don't have to be this, like you were saying, your parents had expectations. And so we come hardwired with all these voices, and we're still trying to figure out. I'm trying to, it's like there were people back then who did have a clear voice, or they seemed maybe more on the rebellious side, right? Like, so their pendulum had gone all the way. And I was like, I don't know that I need to go off that far into that end of the spectrum, but like, I definitely want to like step a little bit more away from pre-programmed perceptions and ideas about who I am and what I can and can't do or be interested in or explore. So that's interesting that we had that in common. I didn't know that.
Totally. Yeah.
And so then you moved to Phoenix, and
so then I moved to Phoenix just to, try something out. And I thought I'd be there for a couple of years. And I think I was there 7 years almost. So it was, this is probably a very big theme of my life, is not having a plan. And that has served me well in some cases and not in others. But I very much just went there without a job and was like, I'll figure it out. I was staying with my friend. And I worked at Enterprise Rent-A-Car for like a hot minute because it was the first job I was offered. But I actually interviewed at the nonprofit that I was working at when we met. I interviewed there first, but they just took so long to offer me they literally took 4 weeks to offer me the job. So I started working at Enterprise right away because I needed money.
Sure.
And then of course, at Enterprise, it's like from day one, they think you're going to be there for life. So everyone was like very offended when I left, but I was like, you guys, I gotta
go.
But it was a good experience and I made some good friends there, but so then I went into the nonprofit world, and I think I started at that nonprofit doing data entry. Oh. And then I was poached into HR pretty quickly because that is what I had done when I lived in Richmond. And from when I say HR, I mostly did I did new hire orientation and set up interviews and coordinated travel and help people with their benefits and stuff. So it was really, I just hung out with people all day. I didn't do any of the
fun part of HR,
the issues. Yeah. Handle the tough issues. So I got poached into HR, and then from there, I think, probably a lot of people listening and you are definitely familiar with nonprofit culture, and that is an all hands on deck kind of thing. So anytime we had events, everyone in our little office would be pitching in and helping out. And I just got so close with the marketing team that then I got poached over there. So I was an event planner for the last probably 2.5 years that I was there. I think I was there 3 years. So, and that's when all of the marketing stuff started to sort of solidify. This is kind of the path I want to be taking. And I wanted to get back into the visual side of things. But since I was trained, to use pen and paper, I had to. So
you didn't have a background in graphic design?
No, I've never had any formal training in graphic design.
Wow. I didn't know that. And so were you able to learn that on the job in that role? Did you step into that there? What kind of projects did they have you working on marketing related?
Yeah. So we did have a designer that we outsourced to. And then eventually we did have someone come in who was like the head of marketing. I think he was a VP. And he chose an agency that we worked with. So we did over the course have a few different outside designers, but we had a brand system and we had access to the design software. And so if we needed changes or a different version of something, I would make it. So I didn't design a whole lot of stuff from scratch. I was just trying to, dip my toe in wherever I could and get whatever experience I could. And yeah, I ended up having a couple things under my belt, for a portfolio, I guess you would say, when I left there. And then, yeah, I mean, all of the rest of my experience is just people taking a chance on me and mentoring me and me watching a lot of videos online.
Yeah.
And reading a lot of books.
And so what are some of the different roles? Did you just go right into was your title graphic designer in future roles, or were you more like, did you do accounts management stuff too? Like, were you a Jill of all trades?
Yeah. So the job I went to after that nonprofit was an agency, but I wasn't a designer there because I definitely wasn't like up to par with, being able to do graphic design work for these big clients that they had. But it was sort of a promissory, like, foot in the door, like, we have an opening here. And if you're there long enough, like, we can cross train and have someone mentor you. And then, like, when the skills are there, you can apply for a job in the creative department. So I took a job in business development, which I did end up doing a little bit of design work, like for proposals or RFPs, responding to RFPs anyway, and, presentation decks and stuff like that. But it was a lot of like lead generation and, stuff like that. But that was short-lived because 2008. So
yes.
I got laid off, and, along with at least 50% of the company.
Wow.
Was laid off. So yeah, but it was actually a blessing because I wasn't doing design, and I can honestly say I don't think it would have gone that route. I probably would have been there for a lot longer and not transitioned into the creative department. But yeah, I got laid off, and I took a job waiting tables at a wine bar, and I also worked part-time at a print shop. And the creative director at the print shop just happened to have come from a big magazine where he was the creative director. And so he had a ton of knowledge from editorial layout design, and he was also a web developer. So he taught me so much stuff about design best practice, and, I learned so much about print, but he would also, he kind of taught me how to do web design after hours too, because I'd be like, hey, I'm working on this on the side. I'm stuck. Can you help me? And he would. So that was
nice.
Like another blessing in my life, something that felt like it went wrong, but actually went right.
Yeah. Those divine interventions. So I'm curious, because I know where you are sort of mindset wise right now, but back then, were you aware of like an intuitive voice that was like nudging you to take these risks? Like when even just when you packed up with no job and moved to Phoenix, like where did that come from? Or was it just a like stick-to-itiveness? Like I'm just going to go and figure it out. And that's just the way it is. And it was more of a practical thing. Or was there some layer of synchronicity, intuition, some signs showed up? Do you recall anything like that?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think the answer is yes, it was there, but was I listening to it? No. Like, I don't think I had a pulse on the fact that was present in my life. I definitely just had like my Ariana Grande, like, I see it, I like it, I want it, I got it attitude. And I was like, if I want something, I'm going to fucking get it. So
yes. That's where I was at that point too.
Yeah. I would just get a wild hair up my ass, and I would not take no for an answer. So yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah. I always just like to ask, because now I know you use that muscle more. And so I'm always curious if people were tuned into it early, or if there were threads of it, but it was like loose, so it's always cool to hear which side of sort of the power versus force people are on.
Yeah. Well, I think too, I was raised in a religious household. So I think that there was this point of time in my early 20s and in probably well into late 20s where I was sort of having this reckoning of like, well, this doesn't fit me anymore, but I don't know what does, because I definitely wasn't like, oh, I don't believe in anything. I've always felt there is some sort of higher power, and I feel like I've always felt that sort of guidance, but I was really at a loss with the language to use to describe it
Yes.
once I let go of the religion. So
Right.
I think that's probably part of it too, is like, yes, I felt pulled to do certain things and I have always been really intuitive, but I didn't have the words to describe that without religion, which is what had been so baked in.
Interesting. It was the same for me. Very similar. I mean, the intuitive stuff I was aware of pretty early on. But I don't know that I was as aware of the layers of it that were at play in those scenarios when I took those risks, because I am more aware of the same as you. It's like, I want this, I'm going for it, I'm just going to do it, and early moments of like manifestation and attraction stuff, but I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was doing it, I just didn't know what I was doing. So like there's an interesting, I'll just pop this in there because we're talking about it. I was in St. Louis and I was working in marketing, and I'd been at this company for 3 years, and I was in all kinds of toxic-y situations. So I was dating a coworker, which, doesn't always go off well. There was some turbulence there. And I just had hit the ceiling for what I was going to do there. And I was getting that internal cagey feeling. And I was like, And sometime in the fall, I had gone to visit a friend. So I was living in like a suburb of St. Louis, and I'd gone to visit a friend who was in Maryland, in Baltimore, and we went to Ocean City, Maryland, and we were at the beach, and she was a little bit older and wiser, and she was like, "Girl, what are you doing there? Like, what are you doing? You are way beyond that place, the thing you're doing. Like, no, whatever to those people, but like, what are you doing?" And I was like, you know what? I don't know, but I can tell you this. I will be somewhere new and doing something new by the new year. And this, like I said, was probably like September. It was sometime in the fall, like August, September, something like that, of 99. And by January of 2000, I was living in Dallas, Texas, doing something completely new in a city I knew no one, didn't know anybody. So that was like a first, I put it out there. I declared it, and it, quickly I stepped into it. And I remember too, I wasn't ready and I felt really overwhelmed, and I was like, I can't do that job. And a mentor just had stepped in and was like, she swooped in and was like, "So what do you think of Dallas, Texas?" And I was like, "Never been." She's like, "A friend that I used to work with at Miller Brewing Company needs somebody to do this thing." And it was like all this complicated stuff because it was an agency employee, but reporting to the client. And I didn't even know anything about agency life or world. I didn't even really know what that meant. And I was like, "Yeah, sure." She's like, "Let me put you in touch with her. She's going to help you beef up your resume." She's like, "I know the person in the role now. You can totally do this job." And these two women just like swooped in and just like, they didn't, the one woman knew me and she had worked with me, and that's what she was like, "You're way too talented to be sitting in this chair doing this thing." So it's just so interesting how that happens, right? And I didn't know that that's how it works, right? Like you put the vision out there, you declare it, and then you step into the action steps, and then you're just plucked out and into the new situation. So
it's scary sometimes to realize how powerful we are.
I know.
At creating things like that. Yeah.
Well, and that it's typically working in reverse, right? I mean, I think the majority of the people are working it in reverse, and they want to call it woo-woo shit. And it's like, well, are you clear on what messages you keep repeating to yourself and to your friends and to your family and to the, like it is listening. It's vibratory and it is listening. Yeah. So be careful what you're feeding it. Anyway, that's whole nother rabbit hole. Okay. So 2008 happened. And then what?
And then so then I was working in the wine bar and working at the print shop. And then, I mean, that really like sustained me for a while. And I was happy. I had, for the first time, I sort of experienced what it was like to not have a 9-to-5 job. and to be like out in the world in the middle of the day, like, oh, I can go for a run or I can take a nap. And I was like, I like this.
Yeah.
So I, of course was like, I needed money and insurance and stuff. So I was like, I really need to get a full-time job again. Cause that's how it works.
What you do. Yeah.
That's what you do. So yeah, I ended up going to another nonprofit and I was the print and web designer there. I don't remember what my title was. I want to say it was like marketing manager. So it was also social media and some other stuff in there too. But yeah, that was a really fun job. Obviously, so it was at the Arizona Humane Society. So I got to be around all the animals, which was so nice.
And Meredith loves dogs. We share a love of doggers.
Yes. Meredith is obsessed with dogs.
Yeah,
Meredith will say hi to your dog before she says hi to you. And she realizes it's rude, but she can't help it.
Sometimes they are better than humans. Let's be real.
I did it this morning. I did it at Run Crew. There's this guy that's been coming for probably like 3 weeks now. And he has the cutest dog. It's got to be like a pit bull mix, and he's just so pudgy. He's just such a chunk, and he's always so excited. And he came over to us, and I said, "What's his name?" and was petting the dog, and never asked the guy his name. I'm like, how rude!
Who's
is
the
that?
dog, bro?
Yeah. He's probably.
I bet it was just a big wiggle butt, just a big.
Yeah,
those kind of dogs are just like they just shake and wiggle their butts.
Yes, and his head is like bigger than his
monstrous.
Whole body.
Yeah. Oh.
It was so good. But
okay, so Humane Society.
Yeah. So I basically a lot more self-taught stuff while I was there. I was like in charge of managing our multiple websites, not really our main one in the sense that like I'd create some pages every now and then or update stuff, but we had to create websites for like every event that we were doing so we could sell tickets and promote it and stuff like that. So be a lot of like micro sites going on, and then email campaigns, and did a lot of print stuff. There was like a quarterly newsletter that was really more like a magazine that would go out, and the annual report was like a nice printed designed piece. So there was a lot of like fun stuff to play with from a design perspective. So that was a really great place to play and learn. And I
training camp.
Yeah, I had a really supportive boss who just sort of let me run with things and, supported me. And when I needed help, she gave me help. And, if I was like, this is over my head, I need someone to like consult a little bit on this, she would do that. So
yeah, that's so great. I those marketing manager roles tend to wear all those hats, right? At a lot of organizations, especially nonprofits and smaller organizations. So that's kind of the role I was in at the company I was just mentioning. It was the American Pool Players Association, which sounds like what? Like what? Yeah. There's an association for that? And it was amazing the experience I got at a job like that because I was able to do all the things. And so just like you said, you start doing one thing and then you get plucked over here and plucked over there and whatever. And we worked with big brands. That's where I met the woman from Miller Brewing Company. And we worked with Jack Daniels and Camel cigarettes, which is, gross, but I got to work directly with those brand managers. Like I was 25, 24 years old, right? Working directly with these brand managers from these major brands. And like you said, it's a little bit of the event marketing stuff. And then I started doing I didn't do as much of the web stuff, but I did do our print magazine, outsourcing assigning all the articles and getting all the articles, editing all the articles, getting all the photos. And at that point, it was before digital, girl. We had to go to film. I mean, it was the old days. And then even like print, fulfillment, shipping, learning all of those kind of basics that now it's like building what I'm building. I'm like, oh, I have all those things, even though the technology has changed significantly. Some of those core concepts are the same, and it helps you build a foundation for not being afraid of marketing.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. Okay. So then what did you do after the Humane Society? Where did your journey take you next?
Well, I was supposed to be moving to San Diego with my then boyfriend. And I took a job in San Diego And then things fell apart. And if I'm honest, they were falling apart for a very long time. But we had a very passionate relationship. So we fought hard, but we loved hard. So we made up a lot.
Yeah.
But it finally got to a point where I was like, I think this is not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I need to get out of this. And I called my new boss at the headquarters, which were in Charleston, South Carolina, for my San Diego job. And I said, what if I came and worked in that office with you and the team? Because I was going to be remotely, there was an office in San Diego, but I was going to be a remote member of this team in Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember she said, fuck yeah.
Get
literally
here.
what she said. And I was like, okay, so yeah. So that's what prompted the move to Charleston. It was happenstance that's where I'd already taken the job. And so I was like, oh, well, I'll just go there for a few years or whatever. And I was there for 2.5 years. So yeah, and that was an awesome job too. So all my clients there were nonprofits. So I got to kind of stay in the nonprofit world, but kind of be on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then 2 years later, you were like, I got to go. I got to move again.
Well, partially, yes, because I have what my friend Pam calls an itchy apple. I can't sit still. I got to move. But I got to go. I got to go. But yeah, so I had been probably almost the whole time I was there. My friend had started, she had been off during all of the madness or shortly thereafter of 2008. And she had started her own branding agency, design agency. And so it was just her, and she was pretty busy and she needed some help. And so I started helping her out on the side, just freelancing. And it had gotten to be so much that I was doing that when I got home from my other job, and I was doing it on weekends. And so at one point I was like, listen, I'm tired. Like, either you get a little bit more business and then we do this full time, or I got to scale back a little bit. Cause this
is more than a side hustle. Yeah.
Right. So she did, she committed, she said, let's do it. She got like 2 more retainer clients, and yeah, I gave my notice at work, and I stayed in Charleston for a little bit, just working for her remotely. She was in DC at the time. And then I didn't have anything keeping me there really. So, and I still love my friends there. I mean, that's probably the place I lived where I made the most friends the fastest. And I'm still very close with them, but the city of Charleston, that area, like, never resonated with my soul. And so I never felt like that was home either. And so I had friends up in Boston, and I had been visiting them probably twice a year, going to shows and just doing fun stuff. And yeah, one of my friends up there was like, well, our lease is coming up and we got to move to a different place. Like, we could just get a bigger place if you want to live with us. And I was like, sold.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up in Boston. Yeah. So that was 2014.
And you were still working for your friend at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I continued working for her for probably 2 more years. Yeah. 2 more years. And then in the fall of 2016, I went back into the corporate world, because, I didn't learn my lessons. So
maybe if I go back this time, it'll be different.
Yeah.
It'll feel different. Yeah.
What was interesting though that time is I had really started to dig into the spiritual stuff. So I had been reading all the books and listening to all the podcasts, and kind of just starting to build this relationship with spirituality and the idea of manifestation and the energy of the universe, and just really like cracking into that whole world. And so I just decided I really wanted to make a certain amount of money. I had a number in my head, and I know now exactly what happened, but I called that in and I got exactly that number. Now I had to negotiate a little bit, but I wasn't taking no for an answer, because, I see it. I like it. I want it. I got it. And I got the number. And so I took the job. But I know now that was a test because, you know, we all pass tests on our way to manifesting the real thing. And, you know, saying no is that golden spot right before we actually get exactly what we were asking for. So it wasn't exactly what I was asking for. The money was exactly what I was asking for, but all the rest of it was not. And I paid the price for not passing that test. But
so in that case, you weren't specific enough about the people or the environment or the energy of where you would be and what you would be doing. You were just more focused on the number. Is that what the disconnect was?
Well, yes and no, because I was pretty specific about the environment and the people, but I didn't know enough to know that it was a test if it didn't meet all of my criteria. So this shiny thing was presented to me and it ticked, you know, 80% of the boxes.
Yes.
And so I said yes, even though it didn't tick 100% of the boxes. So I did learn my lesson. It just took me a few more years.
But do you recall a feeling, even if it was subtle, that was like, this is close, but not quite, but you did it anyway? Because I'm always 100%. Curious, because I've had those moments, obviously. And I'm just so curious, like, if you did, because most of the time we do, right? We get the cue, we get the signal that's like, you sure about this?
Yeah. And I also, you know, this is the thing I didn't know then either. And I know now is that, yeah, I definitely got that. But I was so in a place where I was afraid of being poor and I was in such a lack mindset that I was so excited that I manifested the money that I didn't care about the rest of it because I was in low self-worth. Like I wasn't in a place of high self-worth where I could say no to that, you know, like now I could say,
it's not fully aligned.
This is awesome, but this is not fully aligned with my authentic self. This doesn't align with my code. Like this is, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. But you know, then it was like, well, this is good enough. So
yeah, it's a hell maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned before we move on, you mentioned diving into the books and the podcast and the thing. Do you recall any books that really shifted something for you, resonated with you, aha, epiphanied you? What were a couple of those maybe for people who are at the initiation phase of all of this?
Sure. Yeah. I think probably for me, You Are a Badass was like a life-changing book for me because I just have always seen myself as like kind of immature for my age. Like not like, I've always had a real problem like seeing myself as a like professional by societal terms. And so it was really nice to read a book by somebody with a similar sense of humor who talked the way I talk. Like, you know, when you see it, you can believe it. And so like it took seeing someone like me making it out of the place that I had been in a way that was very aligned with their authentic code, where they didn't make the sacrifices that I made by taking something that didn't align. You know, it took seeing that for my subconscious to shift and believe that was actually something that could happen for me. And I think that's why that book was number one. But of course, there've been a million books since then.
Yes. So that's You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. Is that how you say it? Jen Sincero? Yeah. You could Google her, YouTube her. She's been interviewed on a zillion podcasts. She's written also You Are a Badass with Money. I can't remember what.
Another great one. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah. Yeah. She's great. And I totally can see where you would resonate with her energy. And she's a badass. She went from like living in a garage in San Francisco, right? Or San Diego, somewhere in California, and like eating from the burrito cart that would be going down the street. And she was just like, this is fucked. I gotta get out of here. And
her car was like held together with duct tape.
I love the way she tells the journey too of her story, you know, where it's just like, she just was like this was cute when I was, because wasn't she in a band, and she was like she was an artist and a creative, but she was just like, the starving artist thing is just not cute anymore. Like, 'cause she was pushing 40, I think, right? Like, or getting in her mid 30s or something.
I think she was 40.
Yeah, she was.
Maybe close to it.
She was like, this was cute, and it's time to, upgrade the system. So yeah, that's a great recommendation and a great book. I love her too. Yeah, I think I have both of them. You Are a Badass at Making Money. Yeah, that one's on my shelf right over there. Anyway, great recommendation. What about podcasts? You mentioned podcasts also. Was there a podcast that was or is currently resonating with you in that realm?
I'll have to go with current because my brain cannot rewind back.
What happened?
For audio. But right now I'd say two of my favorites are Expanded with Lacey Phillips from To Be Magnetic. And her team facilitates a lot of the interviews on there too. But there's a lot of case studies on there. So speaking of the seeing it to believe it, to shift your subconscious.
Yes.
There's a lot of that. It's been really powerful for me. And then I also love Melissa Griffin's Limitless Life podcast. She has some amazing guests.
What's so interesting about her is I have followed her from like her early days, and she's fascinating to, just have watched her walk through it and build it and set her sights on it. So yeah, she's great. And Lacey also, so for people listening who are maybe just diving in or wanting to explore other rabbit holes in the manifestation world, I know that that Lacey's work is more on the science side and neuroplasticity and stuff like that. So for people who maybe lean more on wanting some science-backed conversation and how to do the thing on that side of the fence versus just kind of the woo law of attraction, which is always a great entry portal, but it doesn't always talk about the action piece and some of the other pieces that she talks about. So I love that there's so much more diversity in this conversation now, because when I was getting in this conversation in like 2005, it was The Secret had just come out and Oprah was putting all these things on her show, and which some of that stuff is very mocked now, but the core concepts are similar. It's the same foundational pieces to how you do.
Yeah, I think the difference and what made such a shift for me is, again, that like, you've heard like thoughts become things, but really it's beliefs become things.
Yes.
So you could think all day. Right. We have awful thoughts about ourselves all day. That doesn't make them come true. Our beliefs are what make things come true, right? So you could say all day, I'm going to live in this mansion, on the mountain, and I'm going to have, I don't know, a pool and a sauna, and I'm going to have a chef that lives in my house and makes me food. But it's like, if you don't believe that's possible for you, if that's not aligned with where you are right now in life, like it is not going to manifest for you. So yeah, I think it's that bringing the science into it.
Yes.
And so having that, neuroscience layer mixed with the psychology, and then also mixed with those energetic gifts that's the whole package for me. That's something that I needed to shift into a more powerful manifestation mode.
Yeah, it's a powerful combination. Sure. And then I think too, like, I don't know for you, but having studied psychology and the core psychological foundational concepts and having awareness about that and trauma and how that all plays a part of all of that, because that plays a part in your beliefs, right? Like where you grew up, how you grew up, what color your skin is, who what your parents are involved in. Did you grow up with money, without money, somewhere in between? So there's just so many layers to it that it's not this one size fits all, like fill in the blank here and poof, it happens. And I think that's where it gets dismissed. But when you dive into the deeper layers of it, and back to the Jen Sincero thing, And I love that you said that you had to hear those concepts through her voice, through her style and her vibe. And that hit me as a little ding ding, because that is why I'm called to do what I'm called to do. And when I have days like Monday where I'm having a meltdown, I'm like, fuck this technology. I just am not supposed to do this. Like, I'm just not. I've been talking about this thing for 20 effing years now, but screw it. Like, clearly the universe does not want me to do this. And it's like, okay, check yourself, sister. And
that's a test.
Totally a test. And it's peeling. It's just like getting those layers of all that old ish of like, and you get real cagey inside, and it feels like it's like a champagne bottle that's about to pop. And it actually is. Like, that is what's happening. It's like all this old stuff, and you're about to hit you're busting through that next glass ceiling, you know? And so that was such a great reminder when you said that for me of like, because my voice is going to be that voice for someone or some people, and already has, right? Like, there's clients that I've worked with for the last 15 years that are like, yeah, I don't resonate with that over there, but like you've got the thing. Like, I resonate with something in your energy field and or the way you speak about it that hits me and that makes sense. And so that piece helps me keep going when I hit those internal glass ceilings, because it's like, it is that you feel it. You feel that like, this feels cagey and frictiony and icky and gross. And it's like, oh my God, get over yourself.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of that too is that we naturally resist stepping into our power sometimes, because it is scary to know that you might become more influential or become more powerful or become more wealthy or have more success, because people look at you differently. They treat you differently, and they expect different things from you. And that can be really confronting. So I think that that's why we get those tests, because it's like the universe is like, you sure you're ready? Are you really ready?
Are you ready? Or just kind of sort of ready? Or are you really ready? Yes. Yeah. So many layers and so many things that come up. I think too, you know, when we are able to, and I know Elizabeth Gilbert talks a lot about this too, about like letting your fear, you know, your fear can be in the car with you. It can't be driving the car. Like, you may like, cool, I understand you're here to try to like keep me safe. That's cute. How about you hop in the back seat? Here's where we're going. We don't necessarily need your input, you know, but thank you for your service. So that's one piece of it. And the other piece I think too is continuing to connect back to source and remember that source is actually driving. I heard a funny TikTok. So shout out to whoever the girl was, because I don't remember her name. And she was literally like 22 years old. I was like, how are all these 20-year-olds understanding all of this? They just get it. But they came in hardwired that way. Like, their hardwiring is different, you know? And so she's like, here's the scoop. It's like source is driving the car and you're in the passenger seat and you're programming the GPS. You're like, here's where I want to go. But like, you're not responsible for like which way on the maps it's going to go. Like, let source drive. Like, quit being a backseat driver and just enjoy the scenery. Like, just like let go, relax, be like, cool, source is driving. I already set the destination. Now I just get to enjoy the drive. And I'm constantly having to remind myself of that. And now my friend and I, we have like an inside joke where she's like, backseat. She's like, girl, I'm in the trunk. So now sometimes when I'm having a moment, I'll be like, I just want to be in the trunk with Austin. Because it's just like, we just get so worked up, and it's like constantly dismantling that good girl, control freak, over perfectionist, like all that bullshit. It's like, oh my God, ease up, you know, and nobody else is in my brain and knows what my agenda or timeline was.
Sure. Yeah. We put so much undue pressure on ourselves, and we are so unkind to ourselves. It's crazy, but I think that's part of it. Like you said, it's like bringing it along with you, but it's also like, put it in the back seat, like the child that it is, but comfort it. Like, be like, I'm so sorry that you're freaked out right now. Like, that is, you know, that must feel so terrible for you. Thanks for speaking up. Everything's okay. Let me give you a little hug. Now watch your iPad and eat your Cheerios. Exactly. We have places to be.
Yeah. Here's some fruit snacks. Enjoy. And a juice box. Take care of yourself. Yeah. Okay. So you get into the design piece. And so how has that morphed into what you're doing now and like how we've worked together? Let's get into some of that kind of stuff because I really want to also, here's a podcast term, unpack. Let's unpack that. I'm like, oh my God, the buzzwords. I'm like consciously trying not to do the buzzwords when I talk to people, but they do work. The words work, right? So I do want to.
I'm down with the word unpack.
Let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Who is it that says that? I think Chase Jarvis says that. Yeah, I love Chase Jarvis podcast. Anyone creative? Do you listen to Chase Jarvis?
No.
Oh my God! Welcome to your new addiction, girlfriend. Yeah. Woo, girl. First of all, he's very attractive. He used to do a video show in his studio, so he was a photographer. Side tangent. He was a photographer, but he worked in like banking, like corporate banking or something. And then he was like, okay, I'm here on the planet to do something else. And it's not corporate banking. Yeah. No offense to corporate bankers. And so it was photography. And then he started stepping into that and figuring it all out, doing all the things. And then people started being like, how'd you do that? How'd you make the switch? So then he started like creating courses on and things. And now he has a whole company. Oh God, why am I forgetting the name of his company? Creative Live, and it's online courses for creatives, so you can learn how to do all photography and Photoshop and Illustrator and like anything, but now also on the business side of how to run a creative business. And so he has a show that he used to do in studio. He's interviewed a ton of incredible creative entrepreneurial minded people, and now he's doing a podcast, obviously this same way. He just did an amazing one. Start with this one, Martha Beck. Oh my God. It's like the most incredible conversation. They're both two of the coolest humans like on the planet. It's like, I need to listen to it again because there were so many little drops in there. Anyway, so getting into vision and design and like, you know, you've shared with us a lot about like designing your life and whether it's like planned or going with the flow and the combination of the two. And I feel like that plays into how you operate. And also having intuitiveness in design, because I remember there was one little piece like in the website when we were working on it and we talked about a timeline. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I love those visual timelines when you walk into like, you know, a museum or whatever, and they have these visual timelines, but you made it like vertical. And I was like, how did she know? So yeah, kind of talk us to like getting into your own thing where you're at now and where we know you're going in the future, or at least stepping into.
Yeah. So I spent a couple more years in the corporate world, and I was a designer at a pretty big research and technology firm. I guess they were research based and they did research on technology and marketing. So I didn't really design anything like cool or sexy while I was there, to be honest. But it was actually really good because it taught me about working within constraints and using systems and making things efficient and, you know, quality control and testing things. And so there's a lot of like rigidities that I had sort of avoided before that were actually good for me to practice. So obviously, like, you know, every experience is a gift. There's a lesson in everything. So I'm grateful for everything I learned while I was there. But also while I was there, I took a life coaching certification program. So I graduated from that in March of 2018. And yeah, I sort of had this nagging feeling when I was done with that I couldn't stay in this job because I wasn't actually helping anybody. And I think, you know, so many people that are called to jobs of service, even if, you know, I provide a service, I'm a designer and I design and build websites, but I also feel that it's service on a different level. Like, I feel like it's my calling to help women specifically who own their own business because I know how hard that is. So I just felt like I really was lacking. I wasn't living in my purpose. Like, that was just very lacking for me. And so I decided to leave and start my own business. And I was tested a lot the first year. You know, I had a lot of opportunities with high paying clients and contract gigs that they were very lucrative, but the work was so boring. And It was not working for women who own their own businesses. It was not working for companies that I was passionate about their products or their services. I didn't feel like anything was impact driven. And so I was like, this is not it. Right. So I think probably right around the time that I reconnected with you, I sort of started to pivot my whole business. So instead of just being kind of a contract designer, I really just shifted and said, okay, I'm only going to work with women. And I do have some male clients, but I primarily work with women because I'm passionate about helping them to scale their businesses up and giving them tools to do that and to do it beautifully. But there's a lot of strategy that goes into that too. And there's also a lot of coaching that goes into every relationship, because just as you've experienced even this week, it's, people will make excuses for themselves and they will let the fears come up. And that is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So when we're going through these big changes and, rebranding or branding something for the first time, starting a business, launching a business, or launching a new website, a new iteration of a business can be super scary. So that's sort of how the coaching now plays into it. So I've been doing those larger one-on-one consulting relationships through branding, web design, and web development. And now I'm also sort of transitioning, or I guess we could say adding another arm of the business, which is the educational arm. And that is creating educational resources where people can learn these more heart-centered ways of running a business, of creating, design things. So whether that's a brand or just updating, your social media templates or your sales sheet template in Canva, or even, up to building a website. It's like, how can I make that easy for people? How can I make it so that they get this high-end, elegant design and don't have to pay a huge, big ticket price for it, but it still feels authentic? So I'm sort of in that transition where I'm trying to provide those one-to-many resources versus having those one-on-one client relationships, but definitely still in the transition.
Yeah. Well, it's just so interesting because, so social media and Facebook can, and our lives weave in and out, right? And so we loosely had been in touch kind of on and off. And then I think I just, again, divine intervention, saw you post something that was like, hey, I'm launching this offer for, and I was just like, which is also very interesting to the intuitive hit piece, right? Because now looking back, I'm like, I felt 2020 coming. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I was getting so cagey. And I am still currently full-time employed, and I am lucky that it is in alignment. We talked about some disconnects we've had over the years. And so what I get to do and who I get to do it for at a community college is in alignment. And this is the beautiful elegance of letting source drive, right? And getting out of the way, because it was, I think, August of 2019. I remember talking to you on the phone when I was in the car on a long drive. And I was just like, I have to get this into the world, and I got to start. And step one is a website, because I'm going to need a mothership for this thing. And I need it to look beautiful, and I need it to look professional. And I thank God that I also worked with you on the brand journey process, because even though I understand branding and have worked on personal branding aspects with small business owners and entrepreneurs and creatives, it's a different thing for yourself, right? Like I can't do that process for myself. It just doesn't work that way. And so it was so great to have you guide me and also be that mirror. And I just remember the first time I saw the visuals, I was like, ding, ding, ding. And, you had me basically create a vision board with, pulling in all the colors and kind of themes and styles and fonts and all the different things that resonated with me. And then to see how that morphed into my stuff. It just gave me chills. I just remember, I get them right now. Like, I was just like, oh yeah, this is so it. You so got it. And even speaking of that timeline piece where it was just like, were you in my head? Like, how does that? So there are all these strategic things too. And you had all these worksheets and documents. And I remember being so overwhelmed, and still am. Like, I still need to go back and work through some of those strategy pieces, because they're really important and really critical. And this is something to remember creating my own content and courses and programs too, is like, we front load a lot of that stuff, but sometimes the client isn't there yet on the journey. And so it's kind of that chicken egg thing where it's like, I mean, I even remember teaching courses at ASU and they were like, this is a lot of stuff. Like, what's the priority here? Because this is too much stuff. And I've been in courses like that, right? Where it's like all these things. And you and I have had that conversation where I'm like, sometimes, like, do people need all the bonuses and all the things? And you're like, I love all the bonuses. I totally go through all of that stuff. So everyone's learning styles are really different too. So I just appreciate that you had some of the structural pieces in place also to walk me through that journey, whether I used them all then or along the way and still to be in the future. It's good to have those because those are the core foundational pieces to that. It's not just like making something look pretty. Like there's so much more behind the scenes, just like renovating a house, right? Like you can't just slap they call it slapping lipstick on a pig in the house renovation world. Right. But you have to address, sometimes you have to take something all the way back to the studs and you have to look at the plumbing and you have to look at the electrical, and like those foundational pieces have to be there to then build the thing on, right?
Totally, because if you build the thing as you go, you end up with the weirdest shaped house where all the rooms are connected with one room to one room, right? Without thinking about the total picture of the house.
Right.
So I think that's sort of when we're in that blueprint phase, is more like, all right, well, let's like try to cover all the bases and I get as much out of you as I possibly can to inform the blueprint that I'm going to help you build, so that hopefully you don't have to do a lot of renovations in the future. And if you do, they're light renovations, not total,
overhauls. Yeah.
Tear downs and rebuilds.
What's your favorite part of the process on that journey with a client? Like, is it walking them through that, or is it actually executing the design and like getting in all the stuff and creating it? Like, which part of that is your favorite part?
Yeah, I have several favorite parts because like you said, or like we were discussing before we had the microphones on, but I think for me, like my energy is really cyclical and it ebbs and flows. And I have periods of the month that are very design creative, like visually creative for me. And that's where my flow is. And that's where I can get really lost and not know what time it is. And I'm just so happy. And then I have other times in the month where like I could just write and like, words just flow out, and that's like my strong suit. And then there's others where I don't want to do anything creative. I just want to build a thing. So I just want to touch code and like make things like work, like
build buttons.
Yeah. I want to build buttons. Like I just want to like construct. So there's kind of different areas. And sometimes I have to, flex a muscle that's not particularly strong that month because it has to be done and it is exhausting. So, but on that note, when I'm in my flow with each particular thing, I'd say my favorite part of the process can be the creative part, just the visual design. I do get very lost in that. And I just love trying to bring someone's unique personality and their clients' personalities and what they're looking for and kind of all of that energy that I'm getting into a design and see how that actually like manifests visually. That can be really fun. And then I also just really love those moments where I'm talking to a client and they just have an aha moment where, I just guided them there. I didn't like drop any knowledge bombs on them or anything. They do it themselves, but just to see that light go off and for them to be like, oh my gosh, this is my brand. I'm super excited about this. Like I can do this. Like that's really exciting.
And it's so important, the work you do, because these pieces, whether it's a Instagram post or a banner on LinkedIn or the website itself or the packaging for the promotion of a course, those visually are the first, that's the first thing people see is the visual, right? And they either resonate with that or they don't. Like, I'm sure there's people that look at myself and like, yeah, I don't even know this outer space cosmic, what the hell is all that about? Like, I remember my sister being like, yeah, what's that? And I'm like, It's cool. It's, you know, and it's for you or it's not for you. And that is actually good branding, right? Because not every brand is for every person. We don't need to be all the things to all the people. And I've worked at organizations where I'm just like in conversations around some of that stuff. And I'm like, we don't want to be everything to everyone. And that's actually, you're going to then draw in potentially the wrong types of people and not draw in the right types of people that you want to, that you're energized when you play with. So I mean, it's so important.
If you're murky about it, you're going to attract murky people who don't know what they want. Right. So like get clear and then you'll attract the people who very clearly know that they need what you're offering.
Yes.
And you are not limiting yourself by niching down. I think that's the thing people get so scared about. And it's like, no, you are telling the universe, okay, I get it. This is what I'm called to do. And now I'm showing up. I'm showing up for these people that you've given me this gift to share with. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones who need to hear it. So F everyone else. Like,
right.
I'm speaking to them.
Yes. And I think that even goes back to like the beliefs piece too, right? Like believing that we're here for a purpose and expressing ourselves is part of that. And so I think that's what's so great about working with you is that you have that coaching piece too, and that you understand there's like more at play than just if you were only designing and having that traditional conversation with a client where you're not getting into some of those other pieces and parts of it. So that's the gift of working with you, because actually they're double dipping. Let's be real.
Well, thank you.
They're getting, I don't know if you would say you're a designer who also coaches or a coach who also designs. You're a beautiful butterfly. You're a magical unicorn. You're all the things. So with that being said, perfect segue. You've got a course/program gifts to share. So tell us a little bit about that and where people can find it. And obviously I'll put it in the show notes as well, but let's hear a little from you on what that offering is in case people are in need of your services.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So I have a course that I just launched, which is soul-centric selling. So if you are in a service-based business, if you're a coach or a therapist, or if you sell services like design, or you have, small products, any sort of small service-based business who mostly sells online, it can be just super overwhelming and scary and slimy feeling to sell ourselves and our services, especially when you're first starting out. It's just so confronting and can, just really bring up a lot of those self-limiting beliefs. And you hit that ceiling, like you said, and it's like, there's got to be a way to break through that doesn't feel so uncomfortable, where you're just throwing yourself in. And I definitely felt that when I started my business. I was not comfortable with those sales calls. And then I slowly over time started to learn a process by which it actually felt good to have those calls. And I was okay with people telling me no. And it actually just, it never felt like a waste of time. Every phone call felt like a good phone call to have, no matter how it ended. And I thought, well, I need to share this with people, because I hate that I know there are people sitting there not being what they could be for their business, not selling what they could sell and hitting the numbers they're looking for, because they're too scared to have those phone calls and to say, this is what it costs to work with me. Are you willing to pay that? And so I developed this course, Soul-Centric Selling, which kind of walks you through the whole process. So even if you don't have an offer yet, I kind of walk you through how to determine who your audience is, what problems you're going to help them solve, and how to create an offer to help them solve those problems. And then we go into how to structure the actual offer, and then what you can say on the sales call. And I sort of walk you through the script, one section at a time, and how to open the call, everything that comes in between, the money talk, how to close the call, and then what happens after that. So you can find that and everything else on my website, which is createwithoutbounds.com. And I'm on Instagram at Create Without Bounds. I'm on Pinterest, Create Without Bounds. I don't do much on Facebook, to be honest, but I am there, same handle. And your listeners can enjoy 20% off of, there's another course coming soon to a brand course. So if that's available when this launches, you can use your code CAMIK to get 20% off any of the Create Without Bounds courses.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to, you might just see me in one of those courses. So are these on demand, or are you live in some of it, or are they kind of hybrids? How is
They're
that?
completely on demand at this point. Well, I might end up bundling them together at some point into a larger offering with one-on-one calls or group calls. Haven't really decided yet. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, if you want to be one of my beta testers, you're welcome to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just stepping into all the things and sort of in that free fall of like, okay, here we go. Let's step into the next phase of it. So it's exciting. And I'm so grateful that our paths crossed again, and that I felt that itch in 2019 to get things ramped up. And then 2020.
Yeah. Well, and if you remember, you were a no on our sales call. And then you called me back. You called me back 3 days later. You said, I'm ready.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's we won't unpack all that on this call because we just put a bow on it, but that is so interesting. I think I know it was probably two things. It was probably the financial investment, which was significant. And also I'm launching a legit business, because I remember thinking, well, I could go create a Wix, or I could go create a whatever and put a template together in Squarespace or whatever. And heard the divine higher self, whichever voice popped in and was like, yeah, you don't want to do that. You need to call Meredith and like really get this on. And so, yeah, it was get over yourself, get over your limiting beliefs about what level you're going to play at, and put together a legit thing that resonates with who you are. And I'm so grateful. And you know what's interesting about the financial piece? We always think, oh my God, where am I going to get X dollars? Right. And it's like, if you want it, you'll figure it out. And so what if you go, the whole debt conversation is a whole nother thing, right? People are so paranoid, but yet, I carried around $10,000 in credit card debt, and it was mostly bullshit like clothes. And back in the days when I partied, you would spend $300 to $500 on a weekend out, drinking and eating and merriment.
Yeah.
So it's priorities also, it's like, well, what do you want and how bad do you want it? Back to your Ariana Grande stuff, right? Like,
well, exactly. And I think too, that's something that you can learn to tap into on these phone calls too, is like, sometimes there's going to be clients that aren't a good fit for you, and that's okay. But there's also going to be like, I know this person is resisting because they're afraid. And so there's ways that you can very gently dig into that.
Yes.
And if they're still a no, that's okay. But yeah, they might come back. I mean, you're not the only one who's come back later and been like, okay, now I'm ready.
Yeah. Well, because you initially think it's the money, and it's like, and I'm going to deal with this now, right? Just as I'm about to launch my thing, because it's not a low price point program. And it's like, I have 20 something years experience in this field. Just because I haven't had a full-time business doing it doesn't mean I haven't been doing the thing and using my gifts. So yeah, it's not $37. Like, sorry. And that's cool. There's $37 programs. Have at it. Everyone's in a different place and a different level. And I am trying to also, that's what the podcast is for. The podcast is free. This conversation we just had, if someone listens to it and is in the space and open to receive messages for themselves, they're going to get downloads. They're going to get activations. And so that was my thinking with this podcast too. I was like, I want to start, I want this to be a portal for us to have conversations so people can see none of us know what the fuck we're doing. Nobody knows. People, I'm dressed up today and it looks like whatever, but like, most days, like, this isn't how I'm going to be on all the calls at camp, like it's going to be 5:30 after a full day of working, and it's going to be what it is. And so, yeah, so much juicy stuff. We're just busting paradigms up in here.
I think that learning that we don't know what we're doing is part of, that is the biggest aha, is like, oh my gosh, if I can just let go of that and not care so much, because nobody knows what they're doing, but they're doing it anyway. Right. So it's like, don't let it keep you from doing it. Do the damn thing, but just know that like, we're all fumbling through it. And then that's how we learn. That's how we get better.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of layers to that. And it even reminds me back when I did event marketing in the wine and spirits industry. I mean, I was such a nutcase control freak, and I would be like, the ice sculpture needs to go here, and the this and the flow of the, and it's like the people attending this event don't have that picture in their mind of what I thought the room was supposed to look like, or the music, or the scent of the, like, well, we got to have these candles and it has to smell like this. And I want it to be this whole experience. And it's like, and they're going to love it. It's going to be great. It's still going to be high value. And they don't know that you wanted this over here instead of over there. And, the food on the buffet to look like it's just like, we get so twisted in these little tiny loopholes, and it's like, oh my God, let that go, move on. Yeah. Get to what you're here to do. I so appreciate you hopping on at the end-ish of a long day for you, and a long week since we started the week together. We're bookending. I get to bookend with you. It's been such a joy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I love that you're doing this podcast, and I'm honored to be a guest.
Yeah. Well, it's just been really cool to sit and have conversations with some of my favorite peeps, and to share them with other people that will listen to it now, but also listen to it later down the road. And that's the beauty of podcasts, right? It's like they're evergreen, and people could come across this in a year and be like, oh my God. So thank you again. And I'll link up all your stuff in the show notes. And I know I'll be talking to you soon.
Yay. Thanks for having me.
How freaking cool is Meredith? I just love this conversation and hope that you found some value or little gems in there to inspire you wherever you are on your own creative journey. If you're in need of branding or design help, do not hesitate to reach out to Meredith. She's truly amazing to work with. Meredith is also extending a special offer to listeners of the podcast for a 20% off registration of any Create Without Bounds course with code CAMIK. She's currently promoting her soul-centric selling online course. You can find that at createwithoutbounds.com/sell. In this course, Meredith will show you how to get your mindset in the right place, get clear on who you're serving, and how to talk to them in a way that makes them like and trust you, to create a signature offer with a high ticket price that feels right for you, and confidently rock those sales calls that seem so scary right now. This course is designed for service-based businesses. It's ideal for most professionals who offer or want to offer their services online and sell them in a way that feels aligned with their authentic self. So again, check that out at createwithoutbounds.com/sell and enjoy 20% off registration with code CAMIK. And just a quick reminder that my own Cosmics Inner Space Camp registration is now open. You can find that at camik.com/innerspace-camp. So get yourself over there and sign up if that is calling to you. If you enjoyed this episode of the Cosmics Inner Space podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or share this episode with a friend. I definitely want to stay connected with you, so find me on Instagram at camik.com, where I do share a lot more Cosmics vibes on Insta stories, and I'm at camik.com on Facebook. And of course, you can always stay connected via the Cosmics Inner Space Mothership over on the blog at camik.com. And finally, a shout out to the Podcast Pro Shop. This is the Cosmics Inner Space podcast producer, my friend Brendan Shanahan, who runs the Podcast Pro Shop. You can find